Hi there, football fans. It's National Pro Highlights time again. And look at that snow. Join me for a trip around the circuit for all the big National Football League games. The most exciting new development on the American sports scene came to life in 1960 with the birth of the American Football League. Graham is beside himself. I got news for you. We're going to win the game, I guarantee. This has got to be one of the greatest football games I've ever seen, Paul. Ever club one on them? This is the story of a love affair. The story of the Denver Broncos and their days in the American Football League.
You can get it done. You can get it done. What's more, you gotta get it done.
So we are back later in the week to continue our reviews. This time we're doing the last Super Bowl, or the last Super Bowl game. Another short story about football by George R. R. Martin from the early 70s. We've got the same crew today, except Greg couldn't make it, but we've got another guest from the forums. Welcome back, Lee.
Thanks, yeah, I'm glad to be back.
Good. It's always good to have another expert in football.
Expert's a very strong word.
We brought you in to assist the court.
Well, I think you've got some of us beat, so.
Yeah, I think in comparison to everyone else, yeah.
Well, I guess my dismal fantasy record attests. I think expert's very strong language.
Yeah.
No, yeah, but I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry I missed the first half of the recording.
No problem. Okay, so we're covering the last Super Bowl. I guess we'll just go around and give a lemon cake score. I guess starting with Lee.
I'd give it a 4 lemon cakes. I thought, or 4 downs. I thought it was pretty good. It's melancholy. I guess for me the thing that I was a little hesitant about with it was that it's a little. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly when it's published, but it definitely feels a little old-fashioned in some ways. But I enjoyed the story.
I guess the rest will just be by order of devotion to football.
Well, if we're sticking with devotion, at least to our particular team, this is Amber. Amber rocks on the forum. Immediately after reading it, I got weepy and teary, and I gave it a 5. But overall, I would say probably like a 4.25 or 4.5. It was like the football half of the story was really exciting and engrossing, and the other half was kind of interesting, but it was so dated, and I kept getting pulled out of the story by, just how, this sounds like this particular technology you have today, and it just kind of brought me out of it a little. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
I liked it too. I liked it more than the previous story. Somewhere along 3.5, maybe rising to a 4. Like Lee mentioned, I liked the sort of melancholy tone. It's more what I kind of expect from George, rather than the sort of I don't know, hokies not quite right, like the alien football game, just a little gee whiz kind of thing. It did feel a little dated, and a little unbelievable at some points, but But overall, I like the tone. I like the melancholy. So 3.5, maybe a 4.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was one of those stories that it started off vaguely interesting, and you didn't necessarily have a character to latch onto, but it sort of managed to draw you in the more you read, and it just ends on such a haunting sort of lyrical final note that, I don't know, just kind of elevated the whole piece for me. And, it's probably not as developed or as personal as some of his later fiction. I'm assuming this is like an earlier piece. But I really like the use of mythic language and just the image of these mud-soaked athletes, sort of, I guess, quote-unquote, raging against the light, which is like a theme that pops up in Martin's other writing. So I think I'll give it a 4 out of 5 lemon cakes, with the caveat that I only just finished it like 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was the early 70s. I don't have the exact date. I believe Greg looked it up. So I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was a relatively good read. And I agree that elements of it were dated. That being said, in aspects it's quite dated, but in other aspects it's interesting. He was in the early 70s and he predicted some things. Not the end result that happened in terms of sports, but some of the technologies. It's interesting to see that perspective. And he's always been, forward-looking with genetic engineering and that kind of thing and tough voyaging. So
Yeah.
he wasn't completely off the bat, but just date-wise, he was a bit off. And I don't think it's believable. Like the end result is what would happen.
Sure,
And
yeah.
I'm not sure that he believed it either. He was just probably
Yeah.
speculating and just throwing things to see what if this would happen. This would happen.
Yeah,
But,
that was
okay.
definitely my one real sort of bone to pick with the story in the end was that, like, I guess I almost wish that I feel like he's too smart to have believed the sort of point he was making, I guess, and I think the story is like worth that. But I wish he'd been a little clearer, almost somehow, in like demonstrating that he didn't necessarily believe it. You know?
Yeah, and I think he had some sub-points that weren't. It wasn't just the technology. I think we'll get through as we go through that he had to make. So let's jump into the story here, which is about a year from now in our time. The last Super Bowl is next year, 2016, and it's played in the 832 aging fans, 12 sport writers, the Boy Scout troop, and the commissioner of the National Football League. That commissioner happens to be also the Boy Scout leader.
I loved how he
That's a
kept
great
throwing
bit.
that in there. It was just kind of a little tiny bit of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I like that.
And the story basically is, as we said, it's two interweaving stories. One is the last Super Bowl and shows how like this is the end of the line. There's barely any fans, but the players are still putting up an epic fight. Interwoven with the story of how did things get to this point? How did it get so bad for the sports? So I mean, there's two different ways we could do this. We could just go through it interweaving, or we could just focus on one story or the other. What would you prefer?
Maybe one at a time, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're doing it sort of people who may not have read it, especially since this one's a little harder to get a hold of, it might be,
Get access to. Okay, well, why don't we start with the technological side of the story, and then
Sure.
we'll finish with the exciting game. Okay. All right. So it's. I mean, the story is it's retrospective in that way because the end result is things have got bad, and it starts off to show what happened first. And what happened first, it talks about some interesting issues. Like he's talking about arguments are the stuff which sports are made, and then like when you ask somebody like what's the best team or what's the best fighter and what's specific or best player, you'll find out where up and like what kind of person they are. Like it shows their background, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. I think it's sort of interesting because it's funny that like I actually sort of I've heard this sort of thing before about how like in some ways like smartphones have brought about like the end of like bar trivia discussions and like bickering about like who's that guy in MV and stuff like that, which is true. Though I don't know if it's been quite as apocalyptic as George portrays it here. But it's also interesting that he definitely touches on like touches on something pretty like real, I guess, in that way. But it's also interesting that for him, what this story is this idea of like magic computer simulations instead of more just like having all the knowledge at the tip of your fingertips.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's a point in like I think it's the third page where he says like, there's some questions that could be answers and some questions that should be answers, and there's some that they're not meant to be known, not meant to be answered. And I felt morning comes mistfall. Like,
yeah, I mean, it really is one of those things where, I mean. Yeah, all you're going to do, like, you can feed in, like, every variable in the world, right? But those variables are going to change constantly if a game was actually being played. And so even if you had, like, a really, really perfect or almost perfect simulation machine, like, you'd wind up with, like, well, in 74% of circumstances, the Packers are going to win or something like that. Which is just sort of like, well, that's not super interesting. It's like the answer makes the question. I don't know. The answer's not worthy of the question almost.
When I first heard of the story, like football or the sports were dead and the computers had taken over, and I thought maybe he was going to be like, computers have predicted everything that will happen, and then this last football game is supposed to test the prediction or something. But he himself shows that no, it's not that. It's like it's not really predicting anything would happen. Like that would be boring. But it actually just shows it, and sometimes it might be wrong, it might be different, but it's basically becoming an alternate to sport.
Yeah.
It's just and they make sure that it's not completely predictable. There's upsets, but like it varies. It's just more entertaining than the actual game because all the players are good. Every team is a championship team. You don't have like a league where it's stacked with like a couple championship teams and the rest suck. And I think that might have been one of the points. Maybe if you ask George, are you in favor of a salary cap? I think he'd say yes, because it's not fun to have one team that has all of the good players and the rest suck. It's boring. So this is an argument for a salary cap in a sport, and I think like a salary cap in hockey is better. It's helped football.
The NFL is actually one of the most egalitarian sports leagues because it has very, very draconian draft laws that I don't understand. Michael might know more.
No, I was gonna say like I'm pretty sure there is, but please God, don't ask me how it works.
Yeah, like my understanding of it is basically just that like unlike basically all other league, it is genuinely true that like if you do really well, you have a really, really bad draft pick. If you do really badly, you get a really, really good draft pick, and there's no other elements of chance to that. That's the whole thing. And you have to pick people through the draft, so you can't, like, sneak players other ways. And then I think there might be some kind of salary cap involved, too. Or it might just be that everybody has enough money. So at the end of the day, like...
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, it is, like, teams do switch. Like, you know, you can have a team that was a dynasty for 3 or 4 or 5 years, but you can't really sustain it that much longer than that without just the good coaching, basically.
Well, and I don't know, I don't pay close enough attention, and I know I've seen headlines about Russell Wilson, you know, going to be signing a new contract. He'll be the highest paid quarterback, and basically what that means is, okay, shit, now they're not going to have enough money to pay other good players. So there's definitely some form of checks and balances in there.
It is no baseball. Like,
well, that could just be they don't have money, not that they have a salary cap. If only we had a machine that we could just type in and see if there's a salary cap.
There is, yeah. I looked it up. There is a salary cap. It is currently $133 million.
damn.
A year?
Well, at least it's something. I mean, the draft
per team.
For a contract.
Well, that's for all.
And there's
the whole
45 people.
I mean,
on
each player
football
gets
team.
a lot of money. Like,
Yeah.
good. But I mean, because drafting is only half of it. Yes, that'll help you develop a team, but like if you don't have a salary cap, they'll just go buy all those players later. Anyways.
Yeah. It's certainly not like baseball where, like, you know, the Yankees have individual starting pitchers who are paid more than entire teams. Like, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think, like, CC Sabathia makes more money a year than all of Diamondbacks or something. There is some, like, weird, you know what I mean? Like, football doesn't have anything like that.
Yeah. And the other aspect of this underlying story, as it shows, like, the computer started, just the idea of simulations, he doesn't quite put it in the way he describes it. I mean, it would have been hard in the 70s, but he kind of talks about, I guess, either, like, 3D animation or, like, you know, like, I guess we have that kind of, just, like, simulating a game.
Yeah, that was, to me, was sort of, like, this embarrassing is a little rough, but, like, the idea that was an idea, like, somebody in the film industry would be like, hey, I just had this crazy idea. Why don't we have animation that's photorealistic? And like everybody else at the movie studio was like, yeah, that would be really great if we could do that. Like that would have been saving us money for years. We wouldn't have to pay for actors either.
Yeah, but I mean, was that commonly accepted in 1970? How many people were thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it sort of seems dumb now. Yeah. But it may not have seemed that way at all in 1970. But it was just funny the way it was presented as an idea. Like, they say that it was this one engineer, you know, whatever. And it was just like, what an incredible idea.
The words that are used to describe it are very modern at that time. Yeah. Like, just like, but you can see, like, he had the idea, they didn't have, like, the words to describe it. Like, he had to, like...
It actually, you know what it makes me think of? It actually seems like a better analogy for video games and, like, home,
I was thinking
good
Madden.
home cable than it does for like actual, you know, because like it's been a disaster for movie theaters, you know, and like
the
lords of movies, the lords of theater,
but yeah, I mean, like that's something like there's a Connie Willis short story or novella about you know, basically when they hit that point technologically where they can, you know, actually make an you know, quote unquote CGI or animated movie where it looks like the actors are real people, like they're absolutely indistinguishable from filming with real people, and how it just completely kills, like you don't know, there are no actors anymore, like everything is just, you know, you pick your own leading ladies, leading men or whatever. Every movie you go to, you just say like, who do you want to be the romantic lead or whatever, and just pop it in. And I thought that was, and I imagine it was written later or whatever, but I thought that was a more believable sort of outcome to that technology than the idea that people wouldn't watch live sports anymore.
Well, common to both of these situations, you'd think like there's a certain personality element to players and to actors that would be lacking when it's just all generated. You'd think that would keep some interest there. People like their celebrities, they like their heroes,
and they like to have true celebrities, and there's an element of like a real modern day like city versus city sort of a thing. And again, like
civic
right,
pride
I'm more of a college
or
football fan anyway, and so for that especially, it's like I don't care about like the UT team from 1963 versus like I don't give a shit. But like right now today, who has better, who can field a better team is a lot more interesting than that.
Well,
but I think whatever sport you like, you still would have. I would have loved to see this team play that one.
Yeah. I mean, you have that stuff as well. Again, like that was the thing. Like I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to think that the whatever his simulation computer was called. I don't think it's wrong to think that would be super successful. I just don't. I just can't imagine it. Like it would come to exist alongside, like not. It wouldn't replace it.
Well, it's a good point that it almost forecasts ideas of streaming video and video games and things like that, rather than replacing sports stadiums. It's all these other things that people are attracted to that makes it so successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that he did clearly think about it. Like it wasn't as sort of like, oh no, computers, as I sort of thought it would be at the start of the story. Like the idea of like being able to pick your teams, the teams you watch, like that is an interesting concept. So.
And it's a good comparison with movie theaters. Like the idea of the movie theater being this special place that people congregate to is becoming less and less relevant as streaming becomes so much easier. The idea of reproducing video. Reproduction is like the death of this. It takes sort of the varnish off something like a movie theater, where you can just watch it anywhere.
It kind of reminded me in a way of The Matrix, how yes, there's the possibility that this outcome in this story would happen, but at the same time, people are always going to be people. Like there's always going to be that element where you can try and make it perfect, but people aren't going to be satisfied. So you always have to keep that human element of surprise in it. Like even if they were, completely using CGI for actors for every movie, it seems like you would still have to have actors laying down like tracks in a way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I don't think people would stand for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. Ultimately, I imagine that people would still want to see those new actors and things like that.
But acting isn't necessarily required in this scenario where they're just carrying out movements. It's not like they're delivering dialogue or performances or anything. They're just playing. It's not like when you're watching when you're watching football, the camera might occasionally zoom in on a player, but most of the time it's a bird's eye view sort of scenario. So it wouldn't matter that much, I think, to people.
But does a simulation, like, does a player ever get mad and like punch his coach?
Exactly.
They would do that probably.
Yeah, does the computer take that into account?
Maybe, but like you want those kinds of personalities and you want them, displayed and stuff like that. And I mean, I guess they are to some extent, but yeah.
Or millions or billions of configurations that you could be. If they're killing sport, then you've got like 100 years of baseball and 60 years of football. Like eventually those tweaks are going to get boring for people to watch.
Yeah.
No, but they can. I mean, it can make new players.
Yeah.
Like it can make new teams. Like it's unlimited, and it's like the size of the city. Like that was one of the other things.
Yeah.
I saw, right? Like it kept more powerful.
It just gets bigger and bigger. Yeah.
But it was kind of like the internet. Like I mean, I guess it just parallels more just like the TV cable that they had there. But it was interesting that you get the home unit and it would like come to you at home, it'd be sent to you over like the wires or something. But so the one sub issue I talked about, like that you could extract, is maybe a view on salary cap. But another issue like there is like he says one of the reasons why like people easily switched over is because a whole generation had grown up without the chance to be able to watch the game like in person. Like nobody could afford to go to a Super Bowl, and they never got that experience. And I wonder if that's also like criticism of like how how expensive tickets are, or how it's harder to see the game than it was before.
Well, with the
and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. With the Super Bowl, at least, it's actually pretty famous for always being very quiet. No fans go because all the tickets are for corporate sponsors. Like it's if you pay close attention when you're watching, you'll notice that it's very quiet. There's no like fan noise, and it's because it's just like there are very few actual fans who make it to the game. It's a lot of like contest winners and corporate retreats and boxes and stuff like that. So it is very different from a normal football game, and tickets are pretty expensive. I know that the waiting list for season tickets for the Philadelphia Eagles is like 20,000 people, 30,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get. I mean, football tickets are more expensive than other sports generally, but I mean, it's also, if you want to go to a game a season or something like that, it's not ridiculous. I mean,
no.
It's not like it's out of the reach of the common man or something to go to football.
But the Super Bowl is.
Oh, the Super Bowl absolutely is. The Super Bowl is. Yeah. That's certainly true. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Like Lee said,
there's only so many people that can fit in there.
Sure,
too,
exactly.
So that's one thing. I mean,
and that might be what sort of Martin is suggesting. The idea of following a team is very much tied to, I guess, location and like culture and all that. Like you support the team that you grew up in. But when there's this big separation where the people who grew up in those places can no longer attend those games because they're such sort of ivory tower things that only the very wealthy can attend, people who probably don't even follow the teams in that sort of passionate way, then there's kind of that separation between the passion of the fan and the spectacle itself.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly professional American sports teams that played a stadium was that empty. The Marlins, the Florida Marlins, which, I mean, that's baseball, but like they played a totally empty stadiums. When Roy Halladay pitched a perfect game, there were less than 5,000 people in the stands. And
and I wouldn't say it was just Super Bowl. I mean, I think it also reflects. I mean, you could afford to go to one game, but the player salaries and everything have gone so high that it's harder to go to many, like it was before. Before you could go to.
Well,
many.
I mean, I guess. I mean, but it's almost more. I mean, I think the money is. I mean, obviously, sorry, I can't think of the thing where there's only a certain amount of things, and so the price goes up. I sound like an idiot. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Like it's
supply and demand. Sorry, Jesus. There's just more people, right? And the stadiums aren't any bigger, so of course price goes up, commensurate with that. But the same number of people are going to these games. The population is bigger, obviously, but the same number of people are going to these games because it's the same, 80 or 100,000 seat stadiums. I mean, so it's not like fewer people are getting to go.
That's true. Yeah, and it might not be so much a criticism, but just like lamenting that's the fact. That's what happens. It can't be the same.
Yeah.
And again, obviously, I have to stand up and say, college football is much purer, and people should. That's all fans.
No.
You're a true Texan.
If I really, I should be talking about high school football. Probably.
Yeah. The description itself was interesting. Just he kept using the term "lords of sport" and like how they gun fat and lazy and rich and whatever. And so he had a bone to pick with the lords of sport.
It's a funny phrase.
It's pretty cheesy, but it's kind of cute. It certainly captures what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
It's almost like this kind of Mad Max 2 type language where this kid has heard stories about the last Super Bowl and is retelling it to his friends in a heightened manner.
So I have one more question on this half of the story. Is like, even if you accepted this change happened, I feel like things like the Olympics would still exist because the Olympics are like a reflection of not just it's not just national pride, but the power of your country. You just had a computer. Really
I agree completely. I think the Olympics for sure. College football, again, for sure, would be like that. I mean, like high school football, college football, I don't see any reason that...
People are still playing sports. They're still playing, and they're all like slobs sitting there and watching it. It just like they don't want to watch other people. That's what he says, too. They play tennis and golf, but they didn't want to watch other people.
Well, the one thing the story makes me think, though, is that like I end up thinking like, at a certain point, they're going to be like, you know what, like we maybe want some new famous teams, and suddenly all the simulcasts, like... start their own sort of like league just to get like more players, and you sort of end up because like at the end of the day you will eventually they will eventually want new content, basically. You know, they'll want fresh stories to tell.
Yeah, and I think that there's only so much you can do with, like they can randomly generate new players, but I think that I think that one of the reasons that people like the new simulated games is that it's still all the old players that they love, kind of thing, right? Like you can be a Joe Montana fan or something. Well, not in this story because it was 75, but you could be a Johnny Unitas fan or whatever for your entire life. Or forever, and he would play forever. But you could love that one guy. But I think that eventually you would want to have a new person that actually had personality and wasn't randomly generated or something.
And it's sort of asking this question, like, why do people watch sport? Do they watch it for the statistics, to see their team, represent them and win? Or do they almost watch it for the narrative? Like, that's the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter whether it's real or fake or whatever. They just want to see the sort of, the story unfold. And if that's on a movie screen with actors or CGI, it doesn't matter because all they want is that spectacle. That's what sort of fulfills them.
Yeah. Well, just that parallel story that you mentioned, that in terms of like no actors anymore and just movies, I probably would watch that. Like it doesn't make a difference to me when I'm watching a movie if it's a real person doing it or not. Like it's not real anyways.
Right.
That person, and I think actors are paid too much anyways. So
well, I feel like it's different with actors because there is so much brought by the actor just in their face, their little intricacies of their expressions and stuff. But I don't.
Well, they can do all of that in the computer.
Well, clearly they can't because you watch the Polar Express and it's like looking at a dead thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a technological argument. But, yeah.
But even just, what the actor is feeling on the day or, it's all on screen. It's something a computer can't take into account. It's a human thing.
I mean, eventually, I'm a futurist or whatever. I think eventually they'll be able to do that. And the computers will be able to turn in the kinds of performances that people can turn in.
They'll be winning Oscars. The first computer wins the Oscar. That'll be the turning point. The battle of the computer.
Well, we are seeing people like Andy Serkis, kind of these motion capture performances, which are pretty spectacular. But again, I think you need the expression beneath, or the performance beneath.
Here's the thing, like
it can't just be ones and zeros.
You won't be able to, like, there'll be no more panels and things like to go to Comic-Con and have like the actors show up. You'll have like computers sitting there. And like, there's no personality behind it. So that side aspect would be gone. But I would still watch it for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I can see it more for a movie than for sports.
Yeah, I think for a movie, it's more believable. I mean, and again, like, I think that at some point we will get there in terms of technology.
Michael had an old football injury. He used to play football, so just to excuse him. Okay, so I guess. Well, there is that third aspect the third issue or idea that comes up is just what's real versus simulated, and when does it matter? Like, I mean, like, is it right now? I could go watch FIFA and have a game played, but I find it boring. Is it just because it doesn't look real?
I don't.
I want the real.
Well,
thing?
For me anyway, in terms of like the video game simulations, is that I think that the thing that always bothers me, and it bothered me in this story too, but I'm giving it a pass because whatever, the technology is better. But like, it's ridiculous to try to like take a player, especially one who's been dead for 20 years or whatever, and be like, no, these are his exact stats. This is him exactly. It's like, it's your opinion of what that guy is like, right? And so like,
half the debate is what was his stat? Like, what is it, the real ability?
Exactly.
Whatever,
Who the hell knows? Yeah.
But it wasn't. This story wasn't that like sport completely predicted everything and it wasn't worth watching the real thing. It was more entertaining.
Right, exactly.
To watch this, because the first one I wouldn't accept it for completely predicted.
Right.
But that could have been a story. It could have been like the computers have predicted that like this score is going to be 21, like 17 or something, and now there's no point in playing it. And in fact, I kind of initially thought that let's switch into the actual like last Super Bowl story and what happened there, because at times like the score started one way and then the Packers started to dominate it, and then it kept saying like everyone in the stands started to relax and stuff, and I was like, why did they start to relax? Like, were they expecting a certain score? Like, why does it keep saying that?
Yeah, I guess so many of them were sports. I think when he kept saying like they started to relax, he was referring more to the sportscasters who, I guess, if theoretically had made predictions and then were expecting their predictions to happen. And so,
that's true, because they did write about it earlier.
Yeah,
but it was,
they had predicted by touchdowns. So.
don't they already know who's going to win based on computer, the computer prediction?
No, but
No, the computer analysis.
I thought it would do.
The one time that it was mentioned when they were trying to do computer analyses before games, they said they were always wrong.
Yeah,
and I don't imagine that changed because I
thought that was on purpose. Like,
I don't think so.
No, I think they were wrong.
Oh, okay.
I think that there's just too many variables in a real world game to try to. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I kind of took that repetition of them, kind of being received as what you said, Michael, that like they just were wanting their prediction to come true. But at the same time, it kind of seems like what you want is an upset. What you want is some crazy thing that will keep your job. That there's some point to being an actual sportscaster, that you can't always predict what's going to happen.
Well, I sort of read it as like at that point the computer had become evolved enough that it was actually able to predict. I mean, obviously it's sci-fi, but it was able to predict, with 100% accuracy the outcome of any game based on statistics and players and whatever. And these people were basically, this was their sort of last go to see if the computer was right, and they were watching, and they knew that the Packers were supposed to win. And I guess, I don't know, if they did win, they'd made the right decision and they could sort of let go of football, real football once and for all. But, the ultimate goal, I guess, was if the other team, the Jets, won, then maybe the computers could have been proven wrong. So that was the goal. But
I
don't think that
was it too. But it
maybe not. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. That could have been a story.
Right. That could have been a story, but I don't think it was this one. I mean, in this one, it was sort of, it was all very, the NFL was done, right? Like, it didn't matter what happened.
Even early in the story, it says it had begun long ago when someone decided to settle an old argument. I thought that was talking about this final Super Bowl game. They're going to have like a bet and see what happened, but it wasn't. It's just showing how the whole story started.
Well,
in terms of the.
That's what I really like about the story, is that at the end, it doesn't there isn't any stakes on this game. There's nothing like fancy about it. It's not the final. It's not like they're trying to save football. It's not like a sports movie, It's just, it's the last game and everyone wants to have it be a good one. And in the end, it goes out with kind of a whimper.
Yeah, it would have been. I mean, to have that upset, to have that final play would have been the best way to end it, and it doesn't get there. But are the Jets and Giants both George's favorite things?
It's the Jets and the Packers.
No, he loves the Jets and the Giants.
No,
sorry, that's correct. The Jets are one of his favorite.
Because it's funny, because both times they make it, they're always the underdogs, and the Giants are like mediocre, and they both lose. Both his teams lose in the story. So.
Yeah.
But so the actual last Super Bowl has the Packers, right? As you said, I believe had won the first Super Bowl, so it was appropriate that they were there.
Right.
They moved against the Jets, who had also had moved.
Yeah.
The cheese sandwich.
Even I know from his Not a blog that George always talks about how defense wins championships. So the Packers have a powerful defense. Mm-hmm. Offense is showable. The Jets have Keith Lancer, and they have a good offense. But I could kind of be like, oh, okay, defense is probably going to win because that's what he favors. And so they have the classic confrontation: offense against defense, one brilliant man against a smoothly oiled machine, one lone hero against a horde of monsters.
It's very romantic, which I think sports certainly can be, but I love that right off the bat, from him counting the number of people in the stadium, the weather was kind of drizzly and yucky. It does lend such a romantic kind of melancholy, as you said, air to it.
And
it is very melancholy.
Yeah, sorry. It makes you think of, there's a famous George Carlin bit about football, and how it's this wet, cold, industrial game that's played at the worst season of the year. And it's complimentary too. He's not it's not a George Carlin liked football, but this makes me think of that a lot. I loved it. I thought it's a great ending.
Yeah, and it is very melancholic, and the stadium's almost like this sort of dying beast. It hasn't been, stadiums are often like the thing that gets destroyed during a disaster or something, but here it's not destroyed, it's sort of just abandoned, and it's just this crumbling sort of Greek amphitheater that people have just lost interest in, and they've forgotten its sort of memories and its histories, and it's just been abandoned, and it's sort of, weirdly tragic in that Martin-esque kind of way, like what's that place in Essos, like the Sorrows or something? that city that's been abandoned, and it's like mist enshrouded, and was it the festival city? And Tyrion, you can hear the sort of songs and the laughter amidst the sort of dark silence.
Yeah, Dying of the Light, as you said, it's kind of has that themes. There's one thing I'm going to mention here I forgot to mention in the earlier discussion was just a situation where the Lords of Sport, they're losing and they switch over trying to like sue them and stuff, and then they fail out. That was, I think that's what would happen, and it's happening in movies too.
I think that would absolutely happen. Yeah. I think it would have happened. I mean, the NFL is pretty voracious, I think, about stuff like that. Like, it would have happened immediately. As soon as anybody tried to use anybody's fucking logos, like, the NFL would have gone bananas. Yeah. Like, I don't care if it was on the radio or somebody wrote a fan fiction or whatever it was. They would have gone nuts about their logos and stuff. Yeah. But
the courts used the fact that they hadn't objected during the radio stuff earlier against them, and it was interesting because I mean that's kind of like George's argument against fan fiction too. It's like you kind of have to.
You gotta always watch
even if you don't care, just to hold on to your copyright. Right. Yeah. So that was interesting. But anyways, back to the story here. I think Michael, you found either an error or you had a question about.
There was a strange thing in the very first Green Bay Drive. I think it says they. Sorry, I'm not on the page anymore. But it was they drove down to around the 35, and then, blah, 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 Packers, before the drive finally bogged down around the 35. The field goal attempt was wide. The Jets took over on their own 20. And usually you would take over at the spot the other team was when they missed the field goal. So I thought that was odd. Yeah. I don't know why that would be, but...
Was there a rule change since back then?
I don't know. I didn't try to look it up, but...
No, that's a pretty old rule. I mean, I think it's probably just a typo.
Would he have forgotten to put in a kick return or something? Like after the failed field goal, do they just
it's just like failing to convert on fourth down. Like they just take the ball over.
Oh, so you just start there.
Yeah,
it went wide and they took over.
Michael, it does say near the 35.
It does say near the 35, but like also
15 yards.
Yeah, and you feel pretty stupid missing a 20 field goal from the 20. But I mean, it was raining, so I mean it's not impossible, but like you're gonna. It's more likely you're gonna miss a field goal. And it's not a 35-yard field goal because you have to add the things. But so it's
Okay, well maybe George will give us an answer. It was just a typo or something. It's probably just a typo, but it's interesting. You caught that? All right.
I'm looking at a list of NFL rules changes. So in 1994, it says all field goals attempted and missed when the spot of the kick is beyond the 20-yard line. The defensive team taking possession will get the ball at the spot of the kick. Based on the fact that that's a rules change, it looks like maybe they used to just get it to the 20. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Nice.
There you go.
There we go. I'll explain. Right. Yes.
Good work.
So the Packers are expected to win, and the Jets are underdogs. And initially, who gets ahead? No, the Jets actually get ahead. The underdogs get ahead early on because Keith Lancet keeps doing all these different throws and stuff. And so tell me what a blitz is exactly. What's a blitz play?
A blitz is basically just when you go for the quarterback. Instead of you're always sort of going for the quarterback, but it means that and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, could be wrong. You don't even really try to cover the running backs or the wide receivers or anybody. You just everyone charges straight forward. You smash through the defense and you smash.
I mean, the defense is always making decisions about how much pressure they want to put on the receivers or stopping the running game or pressuring the quarterback. And if you're putting a lot of pressure, or putting a lot of emphasis or a lot of your resources on trying to get to the quarterback, then that's a blitz, which is what Lee said it was. You're sending extra defenders through the line to try to hit the quarterback before he can throw, instead of putting those guys, backing those guys out and having them try to intercept passes or stop running backs or whatever.
So the appeal of it is basically that if it works, you knock the quarterback down and maybe even go from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 15 because you push them back further. The risk, of course, is that you are not covering the actual offense as well. And so you give the quarterback an opening to maybe like get a good pass in, or maybe a running back's going to slip by the 2 or 3 people you left sort of behind, you know?
Well,
so
on the second he doesn't have the ball anymore, you can't touch him, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But don't you have like a second before that? Like, is there not like a second transition time? Like, you're already in the air going at him?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's basically. I mean, that's true. It's the rules are a little bit fluid. A couple of times in this story, the Packers got penalties for either hitting the quarterback late or hitting him too hard. Quarterbacks are sort of given a special protected position because they're vulnerable, because they're paying attention to something else. And so,
but
like, if it's
they're kind of
legitimate,
fragile compared to the other players.
Yeah.
Well, that's my question. Is like, I hate it when like a sport, like the purpose of a player is just to injure another player.
Sure.
Like, is that only a secondary purpose, or I mean, it seems that whenever that happens, like, yes, we've injured their quarterback. I'm like, why can't you beat them regularly? You have to injure the player to do it. Like, is that common in football?
I mean, that's a pretty bad sportsmanship to try to deliberately injure somebody. And I mean, I don't think. I don't know. Pretty rarely do fans, I feel like, act happy when they've injured somebody. It's certainly, and again, like, football is getting a lot of publicity lately, or the NFL especially, football in general, is getting a lot of publicity lately about long-term effects of concussions and various things like that. And so the NFL is definitely on a safety kick at the moment, trying to make sure that people don't get hurt as much.
It's certainly like it doesn't have the stuff like in hockey. There are those players whose like their whole job is just to hit you, and like you don't really have bruisers like that in football. But at the same time, like, football is a game where the quarterback is gonna get injured. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's gonna happen, the quarterback's probably like 200 pounds, and if one of the linemen hits him, he's going to get hurt, and it may not be someone's fault, you know?
Yeah. Well, I can get the intimidation factor, which is fine. You're definitely
trying to scare him for sure.
Faster. Yeah. But like, if your only goal is to actually like
a blitz has a different purpose. I mean, the blitz, you're trying to hit the quarterback in the backfield so that they lose yards instead of gaining yards. Like, it's a totally legitimate, not a scare tactic or anything like that. It's just trying to, make them lose yards instead of gain yards.
What would be illegitimate would be purposefully like, oh, he's thrown it, and then you smash into him anyway, and then afterwards try to say like it was too late to stop. That would be illegitimate. That could happen on any play, not just the blitz.
Yeah, and I mean exactly. Yeah. And that's obviously, that's a referee call for roughing the passer or personal foul or various things like that. And like I said, there are actually a couple of those. What's his name? Lancer does get hit badly a couple of times, and they get penalties called against the Packers. So.
Well, the other thing is also you might try to do that, but it's not necessarily a great idea because they'll hit you back. Like, and the team is protective of the quarterback. Earlier this season, the Redskins had a really late hit on Foley, the Eagles quarterback, and it ended up starting like a pretty big brawl between the linemen. Because they were like, the Eagles were furious because it's not sportsmanlike, and because the Redskins and Eagles are sort of old rivals, there was already a lot of like bad blood. So like, it's not common and it's not encouraged. Yeah.
Yeah, the Jets were doing well early, but then Packers came back, and eventually Lancer gets injured, so he goes off before halftime, I believe. Okay, so Packers are way ahead, 24-7. People are leaving like the stadium, and you think that was it, but no. The Jets are coming back.
I did think it was kind of funny, like almost a little awkward to be reading about football play by play, because in the way it's written, it sounds exciting, and things are happening, and I'm trying to read it in this heightened pace, but at the same time I'm trying to pay attention because there's numbers and things involved that I don't necessarily follow very easily. So it was just kind of this strange. It's strange to read a play-by-play of football when everything happens so fast in real life, and you're reading it at the pace of what your brain can understand, or my brain.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
But still, kind of by the final plays, it got exciting. But
Yeah, I don't really know the rules of American football at all, but I still found it exciting. Just like, the two gladiators kind of just smashing into each other and passing the ball back and forth. So I think it still worked on sort of excitement level.
Mm.
And just the imagery of the
and
mud
I can appreciate
being.
there's a lot of strategy as well, right? Like, even I don't know what's going on a lot of times, there's a lot of strategy in the game.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I thought the excitement of the game came through relatively well.
Yeah. Well, he has all this, perhaps over the top description sometimes, but if it's just like the forefront came like roaring like demons out of hell, and it's pretty. Epic.
And just the environmental sort of aspects, the mist and the rain and the field just being churned up into mud by these warriors is very epic, I think.
So does the time stop when the ball goes out? Like, or is it
basically the time if you go out of bounds with the ball, or if a pass is incomplete, the clock will stop. If you are tackled inside the field, then the clock will continue to roll.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's why they're going slower. Like, when it's attacked.
So the Packers are, if you're ahead, then you run the ball a lot and try to run the clock out. Whereas, like they were saying in that last Jets drive, it was all like sideline passes because you need the guy to go out of bounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so they scored. They were.
Is there a 2-minute thing? Isn't there a 2-minute? The last minute of the
there are other
quarter?
things. There are other things that stop clocks. When the quarter changes, obviously.
Yeah, timeouts.
Yeah, timeouts obviously will stop a clock.
Using.
At the 2-minute warning, I think the clock stops, which is just the last 2 minutes of the second quarter, last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, and then I think when the quarters change, the clock stops, things like that. But.
Yep. So they scored. They came close, but there was like a minute left, and they're going to kick, and suddenly it starts raining like crazy. Everything gets muddy, and because of that rain, I guess in the mud, they were actually able to get the ball back at the. Where did they get it? About halfway to the field, or no? It's
what are we talking about? The onside kick, or?
Yeah, the
onside kick. They would have gotten the ball close to. So I mean, an onside kick, you're kicking very short. So you're going to get it pretty close to where you kicked it from, which is...
There we go. Near the 50. Yeah.
Be like, 40 or something like that.
Yeah. It's raining. It's hard to get there, but somehow they just keep passing, kept getting close. With a few seconds left to get there. Lance gets the ball. He tries to run it in, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody takes him out. That's it.
Yeah.
They should have scored, but they didn't.
It's a very George R. Martin ending.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. And then Lancer helps up the person who took him down, and then he smiled to hide the tears. So strangely did the Packer.
Yeah.
Because they know this is the last game; they're not going to play again, and then they're leaving. The stands are empty.
Yeah, I love that bit.
Yeah.
Just the rhythm of the paragraph, so sort of lyrical and melancholic.
Well, and you're kind of going along, and you're reading about the lores of sport, and at least. From this time frame, it seems a little cheesy and like, oh, that wouldn't really happen. But at the end of the day, what they're fighting for is this human competition, where everybody's trying to be the best. And it's just so kind of visceral and fundamental to what it is to be a human.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually...
And no one cares.
I like it. Sorry. Yeah. There was a thing where it mentioned something about how some, one of the game that really killed it was when there was this really boring Super Bowl. And the thing is, what I liked about that is that, I think boring games are important. They happen a lot. Boring games are what make exciting games exciting. It's just
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I thought that was worth thinking about.
It's better when that's the regular season if it's just more boring stuff, and then the playoffs or whatever or more.
Yeah.
Well, and like all the computer-generated games, people preferred them because there were those more exciting plays. But at some point, to kind of resetting the public consciousness of what makes a great game. There were only 5 turnovers in that game, so totally boring.
Yeah, I mean, they do say in the simulated games still had boring games. They were just slightly fewer and slightly less boring.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was really just more a matter of
But you never want the actual Super Bowl to be boring.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
you never.
the only one that always
I don't know.
freaks
I
out.
mean, you never want any game to be boring, but there are boring games.
No, but I can see the argument of like that needs to be. I mean, even the computer has it. But like, do you really need the Super Bowl to like one year be boring
I mean,
for the next one?
no, but like last year the Super Bowl was
Super
very
Bowls
boring.
are often boring. Yeah, I almost like to give it.
Like, I mean, it's pretty common.
Yeah. But isn't it part of it to like? I guess it's having people around you and hanging out. And
Well, yeah, I mean, the Super Bowl has become a sort of a holiday thing here, but
it's become more of an advertisement with the gameplay between it.
yeah, that's
true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I almost am never particularly interested in the Super Bowl, so I don't know.
It is sort of presenting a very sort of gluttonous idea of what the public is, that they need constant source of amusement and highs and all these things from their viewing, I guess, their movies and television and sports and all that. They need that constant rush. They're not sort of content with anything else.
I kind of pictured everybody as Wall-E. Like, the big people who just, they never want to leave their chairs. They just...
Yeah,
Well, no, they
exactly.
still play tennis and golf.
Constant stimulation.
That's true.
Yeah. It's pretty...
When is the last time the Jets and Giants have won?
The Giants won in the 90s. Oh no,
No,
they
the
won more
Giants
recently.
won-
They beat
Giants won.
they beat the Patriots or whatever. Right?
The Giants won in 2011, yeah. They beat the Patriots. It was the worst Super Bowl ever. I had to watch the Patriots. Giants.
2011 season. 2012 was the game.
Well, it's because the Patriots didn't lift the balls. Then.
Yeah. Well, I've always hated the Patriots,
I know that.
and I also hate the Giants, so it was a rough year to be in New England and watch that. The last time the Jets won was 1968.
Oh wow, was that Joe Namath?
Might
Yeah,
be.
that was Joe Namath.
The Jets are
Man.
terrible.
They've only been once, and it was just Joe Namath. I guarantee it. Wow.
Yeah, right.
Is
And the
that when
Eagles
they
have-
were at the Super Bowl, or did they win?
They won. Joe Namath was
Oh.
their quarterback, and he guaranteed a victory like 2 days before. It was
Nice.
Joe Namath's a pretty funny guy, but he was like laying on a lounge chair, swim trunks on, with big curly chest hair, gold chain, reporters all around him, and he's like, "Yeah, I guarantee it, we're gonna win."
That's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, the Giants.
Well, it's one of those ones where it looks great when you're right, but if you're wrong,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
horrible.
But at the same time, like, I don't think anybody would be talking about Joe Namath in 1968 if he'd lost, right? Like, it would have gone down, in the record books or whatever. But like, nobody would remember it.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have anything else to say?
No.
Or
I
we're good?
think I'm all good.
I don't know how much tolerance people have for more field goal rules trivia, but actually, so it was only prior to 1974, which is right around the time the book came out or the story came out, that missed field goals resulted in the opposing team gaining possession on the 20. The 1994 rules change that I mentioned changed it from the opposing team taking possession at the spot of the kick instead of at the line of scrimmage.
Huh.
So just for the football rules pedants out there.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think it was before 74 it would have worked.
So
you
yeah,
mean?
before
Or
74,
after?
the rule was as described in the story.
Yeah, and I think this was written.
Yeah, it was
before
published in
74, even if it
75,
came out
but yeah.
around the-
There we go.
Yeah. So there you go. It fit there.
All right. Well, I think I have to go. It seems like we're also finished, but
Yeah. Just as a completion, like so. What are you? Is anyone watching the Super Bowl?
yes,
I have to work.
I will be watching.
And Amber, I guess, is watching.
I will be watching and drinking from probably about 11 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night.
And who's in the final now? Like, what are the two teams? Maybe I'll actually watch.
Seahawks and the Patriots.
Yeah, it's the Seahawks and the Patriots.
So-
Oh, the Seahawks are actually there. Yeah,
I will
okay.
be rooting for the Seahawks because I hate the Patriots.
Yay!
Yeah, everybody
It
hates the
helps.
Patriots, but I'm feeling like everybody hates the Seahawks now too. So.
I don't hate the
Little
Seahawks yet.
cocky. Little cocky.
I so
But they're-
don't-
And when's the last time the Seahawks
Patriots.
Last
won?
year.
But before
Okay, so
that,
then, yeah.
they had
Probably
been to the
never.
Super Bowl once and
No, they
had
had-
never won. They had,
So you got to try to get that back-to-back
Yeah.
thing.
Exactly.
Get into the record books there.
because what is it? It's the whole thing that nobody's even been back to back, let alone won back to back in 10 years, I think. And the Patriots were the last to do that.
Yeah. It's hard
So-
to do. The
so-
NFL is a lot more even than most leagues.
Yeah, that's true. It is hard.
So I didn't even consider, I just kind of assumed that everybody was picturing this game as the NFC Championship that happened 2 weeks ago. So just to share, I mean, if you didn't follow that game at all or anything. So it was the Packers and the Seahawks, and the Seahawks were playing shitty the whole time, and the Packers, people were actually leaving the stadium, and we've got clearly rabid fans here. And then in the last, what was it, 4 minutes?
Yeah.
I don't know, something like
the
that.
Packers blew a bigger lead in that game than they did in this game. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pretty.
Packers completely.
So that's why you like.
I'm not really a Packers
Packers,
fan.
like,
Oh, sorry.
It was essentially almost kind of the same game with a different outcome. Where it's, you're losing the whole game, and then in the last seconds of the game, some amazing miracle happens. But instead of it just ending and him getting tackled and the game being over, it went into overtime, and the Seahawks won. Incredibly, unforeseeably, total miracle. So it was very emotional for me, this story. I think I've read it before, and I think when I read it last year or whatever, that was an exciting game. It's kind of sad, kind of melancholy, but it was kind of a different dimension.
That's fun.
So Martin's grim portents didn't come true.
Yeah.
Football still has its magic, I guess. Unless something horrible happens before
well,
2016.
We'll see, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Never know.
One more year for it all to fall apart.
Well, I'm glad to have returned to podcasting with you all, and I have to go.
Okay. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining
of course.
us.
Good to talk to you all again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
And thanks everyone out there for listening. Check us out at bastardsofkingsgrave.wordpress.com or bok.podcastoficempire.com. Yeah, and we'll continue our George verse and Martin Sphere reviews in the future. Probably still short stories because they're easier to handle than the books right now for records.
Yeah, I think it would also kind of feel weird. I mean, not that we shouldn't do it or whatever, but it would feel weird after the amount of depth that we managed to do on a 20-page story to suddenly have to do a novel.
10 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marathon.
Longer than the World of Ice Fire.
Chapter by
The
chapter.
Silmarillion reread.
We'll just come up with some simulated people to podcast for us instead.
Yeah.
We'll just create the
Yeah.
simulation.
Yeah,
Put it into a computer. See what insights they come up with.
That's when Duncan couldn't make it. We're like, we'll just put somebody to replace Duncan in the computer. Yeah. We'll put in his characteristics. He's from Australia, and he's
Australian male. They'll figure it out.
There's not too much. I mean, he's a guy from Australia. I think we're probably good.
There's so many things I can say.
Yeah. Good day.
Yeah. All that
on the
nonsense.
boss.
This is me spamming
Yeah. Just Pat say slogans. I think it sounds a bit weird to me.
But that we can see how the different podcasters would have been together, people that can't host together
exactly.
would have been. Yeah, so
Yeah. Put all their episodes
The great
that they've
hosts
appeared
of the
in
past.
one computer and yeah. Mark Maron and on our podcast.
all right, that was good. We did an early morning recording. Just send me your records, okay? Because I might need them.
Very early recording. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll probably
Nice
put it
job,
together
Duncan.
tomorrow. So
Duncan.
yes. Cool. All right.
All right. Thanks,
Have
guys.
fun with the- watching
See you guys
the
later.
football.
Bye.
Yeah.